Good morning and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on this fantastic Saturday. It's great to have your company. We've got the first of our live stream updates for this event that's coming, and we are going to dive into that and check out what the actual go is, and see what the models are happening, and also dive into your hyperlocal forecast for those Patreon subscribers as well. So thank you for joining us this morning. Hopefully you've had the time to do it. But let's get into it. We're going to look at this now. We'll then check out your chat, and we will see what is going on in your neck of the woods. Will I just get myself organized again as usual? But let's dive into it because we have got heaps to do. So as I said, we're going to look at the latest models, the likely impacts for you in Greater Sydney, and also looking a bit broader afield as well. What the rainfall outlooks are saying as of fresh off the models this morning. Again, those Patreon subscriber hyperlocal forecasts, and what it means to them in their neck of the woods, exactly what this event will be. But let's dive into it because we have got a lot to review, whether it's going to be a trough or an East Coast low, the discussion that's been around that, lol. But really, we'll check that all out and you'll be able to see for yourself. So without further ado, let's hop on into this and we will see what the world is going on, because there is a lot and there's lots to talk about. All right, so looking at the latest models, you can see here, this is the Windy, thanks to windy.com for theirs. And we can see this is generally this. So what you're looking at here, we'll do the actual wind gusts. And it always just opens this one, I don't know why. Just so it gives you an idea of exactly what we're looking at. And we'll bring in the chat to see who's managed to join us this morning. And thank you for those people who have got up nice and early. Hopefully there's some people here. Brad's here. G'day, Brad. Lovely to see you. We've got live chat on the screen so everybody can see themselves. So keep that up there now. G'day, Thomas, and lovely to see you both. Thank you for getting up early on a Saturday morning. And we're going to dive into it. So we're starting off with, this is Tuesday, well, late Monday night, Tuesday, early Tuesday morning. You can see here a trough of low pressure extending down from the Coral Sea, which is important because it's going to provide the moisture for whatever does eventuate. We've got the high coming from the west, which is going to cradle it and ridging through to the east. So you can see here, we've got the high here, and you can see the cradle here. So you can see this bulge here in the isobars. That's a ridge of high pressure there extending, and another high there to the east. And you can see this trough coming down here from the southern Coral Sea, northern Tasman Sea, and you can see there's a low pressure system up there in the Coral Sea as well, which is obviously feeding some moisture down. You can see the fetch of these easterlies, northeasterlies is quite significant, and you can see this here where the isobars are sort of bulging down that way. That's a trough, and you can see it extends right down to almost what it does to the Victoria New South Wales border. And the key time is obviously from about 4 o'clock Tuesday, so we'll go there. I've been doing it in 6-hourly blocks because it makes it easy. You can see here, the trough starts to amplify, and that is response to some upper level temperatures, which we'll look at very soon. And that is, you can see here, dragging in those moist east northeasterlies into the trough and squeezing it. And you can see here some the way the trough is actually wrapping around. It's not actually too strong along the coastal border. You can see it's actually reinforcing a southerly, southeasterly flow across us, reasonably gusty, not too bad. Then we're going into we'll go into 10 o'clock Tuesday. You can see here now that the trough has actually developed quite significantly. It's not a low because we normally, when we look at lows, it's called occluded, which means the winds extend right around the circulation. You can see here, we can actually start to zoom in a little bit now. So just one click, of course, I always go the wrong click. We'll actually put that over there so we get a bit more of the sea so we can see what's going on too. So you can see the winds don't extend right around the center, but they're still quite strong here. So that's, the trough is what's called amplifying, which means it's getting stronger. And this area here, the low, it symbolizes just the area low pressure, but it's not a discrete circulation. You can see there's not a right in the center. You can see that there's a trough extends back up through the north of it. And the greatest convergence is actually to the southeast at this stage. So away from the coast, you can see here it's starting to pick up and drive moist southeasterlies into the coastal area. And you can see then the way the winds then wrap around and start going back to the northeast. That's the trough. So the trough basically extends a weak extension right down here through to the border. Again, you can see the winds are squeezing. These streamlines going in together are squeezing together. So that's just the indication of the trough starting to amplify again across the coast. Obviously, this is the main focus. So we're looking at EC for a start too. So we'll then look at the other models quickly and we'll go through it. So we can see we're at 4 o'clock. You can see EC here starts to develop into, again, quite a strong deep trough here. Again, close to a low, probably not a low. It's 50-50 or it's a low or not. Again, it's close to the shore, but it definitely is a deep trough. You can see by this fetch here. And still, I'd say it's actually a trough, this stage, a coastal trough, because again, it's not occluded, and you can see the winds here basically finish on the wraparound, and that's more spillage as around the circulation. Don't be deceived by the wind streams. That's just basically indicating, of course, the movement of the air. Doesn't necessarily mean that it is the circulation. But you can see again, the greatest convergence is actually on its southeastern and eastern sides, and then tending towards the south. So you can see now here, the lines are starting to bulge down to the south, and you can see the changing colors. So I'm not sure if you can see that clearly on your screens. Hopefully you can, but you can see these brown lines, which is normally the sort of high pressure and normal, so like, yeah, high pressure. And then you can see it starts to change these light blue and purpley color lines, which is areas of low pressure. So you can see now the trough is actually extending down into the Illawarra. But on the south coast, we still got this high pressure. So you can see that's where the systems are squeezing together. Close to a low there. Well, you can see it again, as I said, not occluded. Popping into Tuesday night, 10 o'clock. And you can see why I said it's definitely not an east coast low or in the Tasman at that stage. It's just a deep trough, because you can see there's no still occluded center of low level circulation center. It's still not existent. There's a little vorticity here, but that's quite normal in troughs. You can see now, though, the trough actually now is starting to extend right down into southern New South Wales, and there's a secondary circulation / trough. And you can see again where these wind streams are actually colliding together. That's actually where the air is being squeezed together, or the areas of convergence, and that's obviously where the greatest weather and greatest rainfall will be. And you can see it's now extending down the coast. So basically from Port Stephens and south, the mid-north coast here is just going to get that drier wraparound effect. There's going to be quite strong winds, as you can see, and that's the effect of the trough dragging air across those upper elevated areas, and of course that increases that wind slope acceleration, and that's the reason why and also there in the upper levels, if I was to change that layer here and go into and show you, if it's going to let me, hello, nope, why is it going? Let me just go this way. No way. There we go. We don't want that, thank you. We want layers, altitude. Oh, okay, sorry, my bad. Can't do altitude on wind gusts. But if we'll go into there and I was to show you the layers above it, you'll see there's actually quite significant shear just above the sentence, which is quite indicative of this is a very deep layered trough with this complex upper support too, which is interesting. We'll look at the jet stream in a minute. Going through to Tuesday, early Wednesday morning. So we can see 4 a.m. here. Again, great focus of circulation out there, possible Tasman low forming there. You can see incredibly strong winds. We've got there 103 knots at the surface, nasty, and that's incredibly strong. But that tends to show you that it's not an east coast low. It's a very deep trough with a potential Tasman low or deep Tasman low forming. But you can see again here now the greatest area of convergence, of course, is that developing sort of low here, the vorticity. This is the return flow. And which is quite true. This is actually a massive trough, even though it says low 996. This is basically just giving you the air pressure, but this is a massive trough. You can see if I was to zoom out, if I get the clicks right, and I never do, look at the fetch of that trough. It's coming from way out in the western South Pacific, dragging moisture in all the way in from way past New Zealand, putting out near Tonga, Fiji, New Caledonia, dragging it down and then squeezing it. And you can see here on the southern edge, it's more across the Tasman. So the greatest sort of, impacts will be around here because that's where the most moisture is. We'll get some moisture across here. And of course, we've got the this more limited moisture here, but does wrap in a bit. And we'll keep an eye on that because that's where obviously the chance for increased rainfall does come. Why is it always when I'm talking, get a frog in my throat? Okay, skipping now to 10 o'clock Wednesday. Again, this is EC. We'll look at the other models very soon. We can see here that there's, excuse me, we can see here this, again, this area of low pressure out here. Again, it's not a low yet because it's not an occluded circulation, you can see, but it's definitely trying to spin up something there. And it's pretty more indicative of something in the mid levels, which is again indicative of this support in the upper levels, mid levels that this trough has got. And you can see the greatest convergence again is obviously on that very far south north coast, but basically mid north coast, but basically the Hunter and the Sydney area, and to a lesser extent the Illawarra area. You can see the wraparound of that moisture is quite significant and quite strong winds blowing into on the coastline. Let's go across now to 4 o'clock. You can see now it's actually starting to bomb into quite a nasty Tasman low. 985 is actually incredibly low for the Tasman. And you can see how it's starting to split the circulation, because that's actually now starting to draw the air around it. So this is where it is starting to develop into a Tasman low. And you can see there the circulation is almost purely occluded, which means it is almost a perfect low pressure system. But you can see this split here, and that's the indicative of this, the trough, which now lies northwest southeast, and that's going to be picking up that sort of cooler air. And you can see it's actually cutting off that moister northeasterly air from the Coral Sea in the western South Pacific, and that's been actually sucked into this developing Tasman low. So that you can see that split. And if you follow that split around, you notice that moisture from the Coral Sea basically now wraps into the low and doesn't actually get across the coast, but we should still see some good falls. You can see this surge of southerlies, which is enhanced by the developing Tasman low being sucked up, and now that will probably mean that the event's starting to wind down in terms of rainfall for the coast, probably not for winds though. And we go into 10 o'clock Wednesday. You can see the Tasman lows starting to wrap into what's quite a classic Tasman low. Massive, thousands of kilometers wide. But again, it's still not really occluded on it, so it's still pretty more just a massive low, trough of low pressure as it is an exact low, because you can see the winds here aren't connected; they're not wrapping around. So what we mean by occluded, which is the circulation has winds, in that nice little circle right around the circulation. Again, it's almost there, 3/4 of the way there, but still you can see the disconnect between the southern edge of this, which is the building high, and for us to click out, and I will in a second and try and negotiate it for you. You would see that there's a high pressure building from the west and the southwest, and also there's pretty high over to the east here, and this is the collision between the circulation around this low / trough and then the circulation of the high pressure system. You can see it's been squeezed here, so you can see a pretty gale force southerlies along the coast. Can be cold, obviously some stream showers but by all means most of the rain is going to be off the coast in this scenario. Let's skip through to 4 o'clock Thursday morning. You can see the Tasman low / trough, because again it's not occluded, but it's massive circulation. And if I was to zoom out one, if I go that way, beautiful, fine, I got it. You can see it's 3/4 of the way around, so it's pretty massive. You can see it's got that cyclonic hook curve that we noticed from that. But again, as you can see that high pressure system ridging down here and sort of holding it there, or that's slowly moving to the east. It's not sort of a rushing away, but if I was to actually drag you across and show you here, you'll see that there's a massive high pressure system over here to the eastern New Zealand. They're sort of cradling it, so as I go out again, yay, you can see here how this high east of New Zealand is actually ridging back underneath it, and the high over central, also basically Central Australia, is ridging down to the southeast, and there's sort of which basically is what's called that cradling effect. So it's actually holding this whole system and this whole air mass in this area in the Tasman. You can see that by this broad level of convergence here is actually the collision zone between the air masses of these highs and the air masses of this giant trough / low pressure system. And that's where the greatest winds are, because that's where obviously the winds are colliding. And for us, you can see the fetch of the air is actually, and the moisture capability is actually just near Tasmania. So there's not a lot. So that's why, the chances for rain will actually drop quite significantly once this starts to happen. You'll get the stream showers, but there's not enough distance that the air travels across, the sea to pick up moisture and then to be squeezed out of it for decent rain. Still be good coastal showers, I imagine, windy and coastal showers, just looking at this scenario. And then we'll skip through to 10 o'clock Thursday as it starts to make its move to the east. You can see slowly. You can see the high now is starting to weaken near New Zealand. You can see that ridge is now not bulging through as much and it's starting to sort of back off. You can see here this low / trough is starting to bulge down and break that connects between the weak high that's over Central Australia and the stronger high on the east of New Zealand. You can see here it's basically starting to rip apart here, and that will break this cradling effect and it'll allow the low pretty to start traveling to the southeast, I think, and start to slip away and drag along with most of the weather. You can see that it's starting to weaken a little bit. The 993 is quite significant, really, for still for a Tasman low. It's not bad. We skip through to 4 o'clock on Thursday. You see now it's starting to it's deepened a little bit, which is nice, and it's got a nice tight little sort of cyclonic vorticity, but still quite a loose circulation in terms of the wind field. But you can see now it's starting to bulge down to the southeast, and that's basically the indication of where it's going to travel. Always a good little tip for you, pro tip, is that when you see this sort of systems like this, and you can see where the map's bulging, that's normally where the low is going to go. So it's a good indication where the direction of the steering winds are, because it's obviously, it'll follow the area of its, the weakest pressure, because that's, it doesn't like to be pushing up against obviously high pressure, because that's going to destroy the system and rip apart its core. And so it's starting to move away slowly, but to the southeast. And I imagine by either tonight, Thursday night or Friday morning, it'll be basically gone. Let's have a look. We'll go through to 10 o'clock. Yeah, starting to move away quite quickly now to the southeast. You can see here little vorticity on the southern edge, which is definitely an indication it's starting to slip towards the pole. You can see this high to the east of New Zealand is really starting to weaken its grip. The low is really troughing and banging on that little cradling connection between that. The high here is quite weak over now Eastern Australia, only 1022. And that's why there's obviously not a convergence again on the eastern side, so probably not much rain for that. And we'll see that then slip away. If I fast forward quickly to Friday morning, you can see off to New Zealand it goes. Still quite deep, obviously, and they'll get a period of severe weather. But you can see here the general direction again, of course, is to the southeast. You can see the trough edging down already to across New Zealand, and that's going to get sucked poleward. And we've got this nasty little polar low coming up from behind too. Look at that 984, holy hell, with some very cold air attached to that. So that'd be interesting to, we'll watch that too and its impacts, because the high ahead of that's quite weak, as you can see, and it's not really having much influence on the weather. This is quite a strong. You can see that already it's starting to bulge up into Central Australia already, this the lower pressure. So we'll be watching that with interest. All right, we're going to skip back now to, we'll go to Tuesday 4 a.m., which is when we've been starting. We'll have a look at what GFS has got to say. We might stay out in this broader view here. So again, it basically agrees with what EC had, decent easterly, northeasterly feed coming out of the southern, the western South Pacific, forming into a trough here. You can see the way the isobars are wrapped around. Just don't get caught into the hype about the wind streams. It's basically just windy, giving you an idea about how the air's circulating. Doesn't necessarily mean, again, there's a circulation there, because you can see quite clearly it's not occluded. It's quite messy, but you can see the trough extending right down the south coast, and again, quite a deep trough. And you can see it's cradled again by a high. Now, the difference between GFS and EC, as you can pretty see straight away, is the location of the high. This one is obviously further south, which means it's going to be able to cradle that air mass a bit better than the one that's a bit further north. Let's go across to 10 o'clock as we would. You can see here again, it's developing quite a decent strong trough. Again, it's not really a low as such, because it's not really an occluded circulation, but you can see the greatest convergence again is on the southern side, and the winds are wrapping into it. You can see the return flow is not that strong on the western side. You're only looking at moderate winds there, maybe 25, maybe 30 knots, and that's not quite strong. And you can see again the trough is starting to amplify down the east coast by the way that the isobars here are bulging. You can see the collision of the air masses between the air mass of the high pressure system, which is those browny colour lines, and then of course then the trough, which is those bluey colour lines. You can see on GFS anyway that the influence of the trough is not that significant yet. You can see the high pressure system still quite dominant in terms of that, but that collision of that convergence of the air masses there definitely would enhance rainfall potential. Going into Tuesday now afternoon, 4 o'clock as we do, You can see here that GFS likes to start to try to develop a low, but again, it's a deep trough with a circulation vorticity. Again, it's not included right around, so you can see, ignore the wind streams, but you can see those winds aren't wrapping quite a way around. You can see they basically stop halfway around, and that is really indicative of a deep coastal trough with a vorticity. It says low 996, and people will be like, oh my God, East Coast low. Well, it's actually not an East Coast low, because again, as I keep saying to you, it has to have it included. It has to have these winds wrapping right around the low level circulation center. They're not, as you can see quite clearly. We can see that the eastern side is obviously quite strong, and the western side is strong. The eastern side is basically non-existent, and that is just indicative. The problem with these is, of course, if you see this 2D, if you were to see this 3D, what we're basically seeing here is the air traveling along the surface and then wrapping up into the sky. And so it's swirling up, and that gives you an indication maybe it looks like a low, but it's actually not. It's the air as it's been sucked up into the air as part of this troughing system. You can see here the trough now amplifying right down through the southern Tasman Sea, almost into near Tasmania. Again, the high in different locations than what EC had too. So this is a little bit more of a cradling effect than EC had. And that is important because in terms of longevity and likely, the consequences of weather, how long the weather hangs around. Again, you can see decent trough, very deep trough. Again, it says low 997. It's a low pressure system. That's a low trough of low pressure, of 997. It's not really, again, a low because you can see the winds aren't included, although it's starting, it's 75% of the way around now, so it's starting to sort of wrap around. But there's still a bit of disconnect here between this convergent area on the southern side and then the area on the northern side wrapping in. We'll keep an eye on that. It's probably the closest we've seen in terms of trying to get an east coast. I think there you go, straight away what I was saying. It's just a deep trough of low pressure. And the label L992, automatic people will go, oh my God, it's a low pressure system. Well, it's actually no, it's a trough of low pressure. You can see how wide it is. And again, there's not an occluded circulation. Yeah, there's aspects of it where it's concentrated, which is the convergence area. But again, it's not wrapping around a central low level circulation center like you see a traditional. And of course, Tasman lows, you don't, because they're cold cores, you don't get that tight little beautiful little circle you get with tropical cyclones, of course. But you still get that circular wind field. The winds are just disparate from this level of circulation center, but you still get a circle. And you can see here, it's not even close to a circle. You can see that basically the trough is actually now pivoted and now lies more sort of east-west. And you can see the greatest convergence is now off to southeast, which is not the best for rainfall in terms of the coast, if anybody's looking for rainfall, but you still get some good falls because you can see the wind streams here converging across the coast, basically from northern Hunter, sort of Port Stephens down through the Illawarra. But the greatest sort of convergence here is that moist air from the western South Pacific, Coral Sea, northern Tasman, into this area here on the eastern side of the trough. And the southern sort of side and the western side of the trough is really, the fetch of the winds isn't as long as it is from here. So there'll still be some decent rain looking at that scenario. We'll dive into that soon. Heading to 10 a.m. again. So it's definitely now trying to form a Tasman low because you see here, the winds are almost connected right around that circulation center. And you can see it's pivoted now. So it's actually pivoting now. So the trough is now starting to align more southeast, northwest. You can see here by the bulge. So that's definitely indication that she's going to start moving to the southeast within the next 24 hours or so as it starts to, the pressure starts to lower on that southeastern side. And you can see the ridge bulging in from the western side, which is going to bump it down. You can see here the cradling high, 1,031's, reasonably strong. But here's the weakness here, which is where that low is going to head. You can see here there's... you can see how these isobars are disconnected, and that's obviously the cradling is weak, and that's where the low is going to exploit that and bugger off towards the pole, which is what they all do, and that's part of the the Earth's heat management cycle, trying to balance out the warmer areas from the colder areas. So she's on a move soon. I'd say within 12 hours, maybe 18 hours, it should be gone to the southeast. Let's go 4. In fact, it's starting to make its move already. So still there, but you can see here now quite distinctly the trough has pivoted or tilted definitely even more northwest now, southeast. You can see here, still quite deep, 991, and still really struggling to even call that a low. You can see that's still really just a real not connected around there. Well, that's almost there, but you can see how it's like this sort of elongated, weird sort of egg shape, just really a deep trough with like a central vorticity. But you can see here, the better news for this is that there's a bit more of a convergence on the southwestern side. And you can see the fetch of the winds is a bit better. I mean, it's picking up moisture from the Southern Ocean now. Now, of course, we all know the Southern Ocean, because it's colder, the air doesn't hold as much moisture as warm air does. But still, the fetch of the winds is a lot longer, so it should give that more opportunity to pick up moisture. Although we do have this ridge bulging through here, which may actually squeeze some of the moisture out. But again, just sort of gusty coastal showers in this scenario with GFS anyway, not massive rainfall totals. Scooting through to Wednesday night now, 10 o'clock, you can see here, it's starting to transition to almost a classic Tasman low. You can see circulation, the winds are almost now connected right around an included circulation. You can see here, still a bit elongated. You can see a bit of a bulge back to the northwest, which is interesting. You can see that it's trying to force a trough back up to the northwest there, and there's a trough coming down here to the southeast, which is obviously where it's going to go. You can see the greatest convergence here is where the high is bashing into the low circulation on the southern side, and it's probably try to extend this trough to the northwest, just because this high is actually slipping to the south itself, and so it's weakening its dominance over here. You can see here again, so that's why it's backing back up the way. You can see this weakness this way. That 1024 high is really nothing. This is the beast over here that's driving it. Again, let's go to 4 o'clock Thursday, and you can see, yeah, basically the high is ridged back up. It's cut off this bit of escapism that they was trying to do it to the northwest there. You can see quite clearly it's going to start scooting off the southeast, and it's doing it very slowly. Again, you're still struggling to even call it a Tasman low, to be honest, because it's really not occluded around a circulation. Although this is probably the closest it's been on GFS anyway. But you can see it's still quite a disconnect. You've got this inflow arc here, which is the trough. So you can see the collision and convergence between the high pressure system to the east of New Zealand and the circulation on the low. But there's quite a strong disconnect here. You can see the line here between the systems. So there's the circulation's air mass sort of closed system there, and then you've got this boundary collision here. So then shows to me that's really starting to weaken and start to bugger off, and we can see that now it's starting to back out, and you can see it's heading now back to 994, heading to the southeast slowly. Still going to drive, unfortunately, gusty, horrible winds along the coast. Not much rain, pretty showers with that, I say, but not a lot in that showers. Again, slow moving because the highs is just still hanging in there, cradling it, but it's heading southeast slowly, and we can see it'll start to sort of accelerate away. Overnight Thursday into Friday, you can see away it goes, and being captured by those mid-latitude westerlies, no doubt, very soon. All right, let's go. We'll check out what Icon's got to say, and then we'll look into what the rainfall call. We'll look at access as well, of course. We'll do a bit quicker this one around. Let's go. So Icon's basically got the same scenario as EC and GFS, so we can pretty much say there is going to be a deep coastal trough forming, and what happens after that, I guess, is we'll see with the upper support. But same deep inflow from the east-northeast, which is going to feed plenty of moisture into it. Now, that's the key. If it gets cut off, then the chances of obviously rainfall will diminish dramatically. You can see it's definitely not an east coast low in any event. You can see there's no real occluded circulation, or it's trying very hard there, but it's off the coast. So, but again, you see that this is interesting because Icon actually has the trough developing to the northeast. You can see the greatest convergence areas on the south and the southeastern side. Really tight little wrapping in effect there, closest to where the low we've probably seen. And Icon, over all the runs, to be fair to Icon, has always been consistent about the development of this as an occluded low pressure system for some period of time. But again, almost there, 999. Still, you can see here, it's not really occluded. And in fact, we might start zooming in a little bit more now, get a bit more detail as we move into the rainfall. Again, close. A lot of people out there trying to decry this as an East Coast low and stir up the clickbait hype. It is not an East Coast low yet, even though that wind streams tend to think, oh my God, it's a low. It says low 999. It's a really deep coastal trough. Again, there's no circulation right around it. It's close, wrapping in pretty close, but it doesn't mean it's not going to be pretty nasty conditions. Basically, south of the mid north coast, lower south mid north coast. Basically, from Port Stephens right down to probably the Illawarra, I'd say, with the exposed coastal areas getting probably the worst of it on Icon anyway. Getting into Tuesday night, 10 o'clock. That's actually a low. And again, as I said, Icon has been pretty consistent in the development of a low outside of everything else. That's actually a low. You can see how now it's occluded, which means it basically has its own circulation. You can see the winds wrapping around that. That is definitely a low. But you can see this disconnect. The trough on the southern side is quite disconnected from it. You can see so there's massive trough feeding in here, and that's pretty better for rain in terms of rainfall for the coastal areas. We can see the northeasterly is basically not being sucked in by the low, and so it's going to be squeezed into those coastal areas. And we'll see what it does. Heading into Wednesday, 4 o'clock, you can see it was briefly a low. It's struggling to even be a low now. You can see here it's weakening again. You can see how it is bulging down to the southern side, so it's troughing, because the trough's actually massively dominant. You can see here this coastal trough here is really strong. So it's a low probably, but it's more a vorticity in the trough itself, or it does occlude. We saw that before last night. It barely maintains a low structure. If I was to go here, you can see still not occluded. Starts to occlude there. Definitely that nice little pinhole look there. Definitely is a low there. In respect, you can see to Tuesday night, it briefly occludes, turns into a low. You can see there nicely, and then we start to see the trough is still dominant to the south, and it's just going to actually suck away from the low. Still low there, but you can see its influence is it's quite shallow. It's really not much at all. It's actually the trough that's driving this, and as I said, it's more of vorticity in the actual trough than it is a trough, a low itself. And you can see here, and going to skim out off into a Tasman low, but still, even again, the circulation is not occluded because the trough is just driving it, the outer circulation. Then it really starts to transition probably into a Tasman low, or tries to anyway. Massive Tasman sort of low / trough. It's pretty close as we've seen, to be honest, in all the examples so far of a true Tasman low. But you can see the wind fields on the western side remain pretty strong, but you can see the coast, it's off the coast by Thursday, really Thursday sort of lunchtime, afternoon. You start to see those winds back away, dramatic, and again, away it slides to the east-southeast as it gets captured by the next passing systems. All right, we will then check out access. We'll have a look at rainfall, and then we'll look at your Patreon subscriber stuff. All right, so we're into Tuesday morning, which we've been looking at. We can see here, a deep trough. You can see the greatest convergence on the eastern side of the stage, and there's sort of return flow on the western side up the coast. So it'd just be gusty southerlies with maybe some sort of scattered showers. Not much rain with that yet because the moisture is quite limited. Although we can see this northeasterly surge in moisture coming in on the eastern side of the trough. We'll skip on to 10 o'clock, which is what the time. You can see again here, definitely a deep trough. You can see the location of the trough, or the axis of the trough, is well off the coast as opposed to the other ones, which is close to the coast, which says to me the axis is probably going to be lower in terms of rainfall, just because the greatest focus or convergence is, we can see well off the coast for a start, and also on its southeastern side, so away. And you've got this drier return flow on the western side and southwestern side. You can see it bulging down here, so it's definitely, the trough is amplifying and pushing south. Let's kick into 4 o'clock Thursday, and that's interesting here. This is one thing I've been watching with Axis. It does retrograde quite a lot. So you can see here how the trough is actually now pushing in towards the coast, or retrograding, which retrograding just basically means pushing west. And when we talk about retrograding, it's just really a swanky term for saying, the normal geostrophic flow of systems in the southern hemisphere, is from west to east. That's the way all systems tend to move. And when systems move against that flow, we sort of call it retrograding, which means because they're pushing against that flow, which means that there's obviously some dominant steering that is contra to that, and indicates, some decent upper level support, and also the strength of the system as well. And you can see here, not a low, just a very deep trough, because again, the winds aren't wrapping right around a circulation center. There, you can see here, that sort of hook, that Nike flick that we talked about with the last event, is very indicative of a trough. We see into 4 o'clock Thursday, which is what Tuesday, sorry, which we've been doing. You can see complex trough now with a really tight vorticity up near to the northeast of Lord Howe Island. You can see the squeezing of the air there, and it's pretty very small surface low looking at that, maybe mid levels driving that. And you can see here this trough backing right down, still quite deep. 997 is amazing with trough. But you can start to see, we noticed in the other models too, quite strong winds actually for the coast on access anyway. But again, the disconnect of those beautiful soupy east northeasterly warmer air, and instead this sort of leftover sort of ridgy high air and sort of some of the wraparound effect air. And that says to me that access is probably going to be the dry out of all the models. We'll see how my forecast has looked. I haven't looked at it yet. Again, you can see now how this is retrograded again. The trough, it's complex, not a low, because you can see here the way there's a squeeze, there's no one real circulation center, or that's trying very, it's close to sort of here, but you can see it's almost occluded. It's multi-centered. I suggest this here is that vorticity we've been watching. I think that's going to bomb into a pretty nasty Tasman low. That's my guess. I haven't looked at access, so we're seeing this live together. You can see here the consequence though of this this system sort of deepening and amplifying is this really nasty period of winds along the coast. You know, up to 60 knots, 65 knots for coastal areas is pretty nasty into Tuesday night, which is interesting because they've always focused the worst weather in Wednesday, and so they've brought it ahead a bit. Let's head into Wednesday now, 4 o'clock, and you can see here, yeah, what I thought. This system, the weaker system, it's now transitioning into a pretty nasty Tasman low. You can see it's almost wrapped around that circulation center already. It's just a very small gap, but not like 80%. Really nasty system. You can see from very strong winds down there, 70 knots, 75 knots. And you can see again this little disconnect. You can see there's blank sort of slot here, so the wraparound effect of the trough, and then the low's own circulation here now. It's starting to sort of suck in towards itself. And that's probably the biggest difference that Axis has to all the other models at this stage, is this pivoting of the tilting of this trough to be more west-east. You can see this here, how it lies west-east, and you can watch that sort of then start to, you can see it with your own eyes, it tilts and goes northwest-southeast as that Tasman low starts to really take over and basically cannibalizes this, but it's still going to be a pretty nasty period of 68 and 70 knot winds on the coast of Sydney is really nasty bad. And it should be some decent rainfall on overnight Tuesday into Wednesday, because look at this, easterlies here are still, and they're not being sucked right into the Tasman low yet, so they're actually ploughing into the coast and being squished together by these incredibly strong winds. So some good rain early Wednesday morning. Looking at that, we'll see if we're right. Again, look at those winds. That's bad. Like, that's really, really bad. You know, Axis is probably the worst in terms of winds at this stage. And you can see this, as we said before, that Tasman low is cannibalized the other low. And that easterly flow, though, is still pumping into us unfettered at this stage. And we'll go into Wednesday now at 10 o'clock, as we have been doing. You see it's actually retrograded again, and it's just how deep this trough is. You can see that the Tasman low hasn't really been able to get winding up. It's, you know, it gets close, and then the trough is just dominating. And again, you can see this sustained nasty winds right along that coastal edge, basically from Newcastle south to the southern or the northern south coast. Incredibly strong winds, nasty weather on Wednesday. Maybe not so much rain, but definitely winds. You can see here for Axis anyway. And again, you can see how it's tilting around, pivoting around now. And you can see how it's now going more north-south. And that is as the system starts to get captured and start to head east-southeast very quickly. And you can see now these nasty southerlies. Look, wow. You know, 50, 60 knot gusts sustained all of Wednesday so far. And you can see again, it's still really not a true low, although it's starting to try and, but it's just really massive area of trough of low pressure with some embedded vorticities, no doubt about that. But hard to actually call it a true low, because it's, you know, it's pretty close to there, because it actually is its own circulation. As you can see, there's a disconnect between the trough, which is this band of nasty winds, which is where it's smashing against the high pressure, and then you've got the circulation here, which is of course the air to the north as it's been sucked into this massive trough. You can see here definitely a circulation there. So you definitely can fairly call that a Tasman low, although it's not, the actual center itself is not too strong. Let's go through here. You can see now starting to make its journey to the east and starting to loosen the impacts on the east coast, so that you'll have those raging showers and stuff off the coast. And we'll be all jealous that we see them. But again, way it goes as it gets captured, just churning away. Definitely eating at those sea surface temperatures on the Tasman, and away she goes. Alrighty, let's turn into our rainfall now and see what is happening with that. And yeah, let's go. We'll make sure to bring the chart back up here so you guys can see it. Let's go. I'm going to leave this here. No, it's a bit dodgy, but who cares? Actually, the likely impacts first of all. Let's have a look at that. So basically, you can see from Tuesday sort of afternoon through to Wednesday, or most of Wednesday, we're still getting, there's still heavy rainfall forecast, and we'll see that why, because EC is definitely going through for some good rainfall. GFS to some access to some extent, but no. But still, again, when we'll see the hyperlocal forecast very soon, there's still some pretty big falls forecasts at this stage. Of course, they've been fluctuating too, so that's something to put a big asterisk next. But I think the greatest aspect of this is going to be the damaging wind aspect. And most likely more than 90 k's an hour. If it's going to be up to 56 knots, you're probably looking at 110 k's an hour. I've been conservative there because there was just sort of not a lot of consistent still, and it's only Saturday, and because this is not going to start to Tuesday, it's still not really in that that window of reliability yet that we can sort of start to say, yeah, this is going to happen. I mean, it's certainly pointing to happening. And saying that, we're starting to get some rainfall. So those people who want some rainfall, don't get too morose about it. We'll still get some rainfall, especially as it's been so dry. And it looks like the mid-north coast will probably escape most of the rainfall. I haven't looked at the rainfall outlooks myself, so I'm just looking at what I've just seen in the pressure maps. But it looks like the mid-north coast will do okay. So they should breathe a bit of sigh of relief after the living fear has been put into them. But again, we'll look at the rainfall maps very soon, but I think they should be okay with the big asterisk next to it. Of course, any heavy rain that does fall in a concentrated period always increases the risk of flash flooding. I don't see any riverine flooding at this stage. There's just not that concentrated heavy falls along the Great Dividing Ranges. As you can see, the circulations remain offshore. There's maybe one period there where Icon does have it close to being East Coast low. The rest do not have an East Coast low. So, that's the widespread sort of rainfall that's needed along the Great Dividing Range, for example, and those high elevated areas to really then fill up the river catchment areas to lead to riverine flooding, just isn't there at this stage, unless things massively change. And of course, the other thing is, so the winds, damaging winds and destructive winds are potentially on the coastline. And then, of course, the coastal hazard, which is the massive seas and the erosion and storm surge as well, especially from that long fetch of those winds just ploughing into the coast. There's definitely storm surge impacts, basically south of Port Stephens, right through the south coast. So be aware of that. All right, let's go for the rainfall outlook. This is for our Patreon people. First of all, it helps make it big, didn't I? I was in a rush. This is obviously our Eclipse blended model of all the models out for. You can see does some good falls there. I'm not sure about the stuff. I think the falls in that sort of area there in the mid-north coast, as you can see, just sort of back around. I think that is actually weighed in by EC. I think EC is overpowering every model at this stage. I'm not sure that EC is necessarily going to come off and giving that sort of flow. But you can see still some pretty good falls concentrated between sort of Sydney and Newcastle on the coast. And then again, a spot round in this Illawarra too, and that escarpment effect, the winds being enhanced as they get lifted up over the escarpment. But, you can see, this is what I'm saying, you can see the falls taper off significantly as it gets inland. And that's why I say, like, the risk of any estuarine flooding, river flooding, so riverine flooding is basically very low. It'd be just coastal streams, I'd say, at this stage. Nothing to be concerned about from that perspective. And you'll see here, this is the model output. So, and I'll point to them as we go along. So this is the Bureau's Met I1. You can see it basically has the falls hugging the coast. And again, it likes the Illawarra and Sydney coast areas as opposed to anything north. So that's that access scenario we were just looking at, that constant sort of easterly flow from the trough banging into the coast. So again, This is the Med-Eye one, and you can see the falls taper off quite significantly. So there's going to be no real, and you see Axis here doesn't have any sort of significant falls to that mid-north coast area. So they can, again, I think they can breathe a sigh of relief. I think it's just one model that's sort of dominating that. And we'll see that in a minute. This one here is this is AIFS, which is the EC's AI model. Again, you can see it basically is almost supporting 100% the Bureau's Med-Eye model. So again, concentrating the falls for the Illawarra, Sydney, and sort of Central Coast, and a little bit of Newcastle. You can see not a lot of falls again for that mid-north coast area. So that's, you know, it's 2 out of the 2 models so far that says they're going to be okay. And you can see basically Sydney, Illawarra, and sort of Southern Hunter are going to be the focus on this event so far. This is the CMC. CMC is not in love with anybody. So you can see barely any falls, mostly just scraping the Metro Coast or Sydney Coast and the sort of Central Coast. Some pretty heavy falls just clipping the very far eastern, northeastern Hunter, but you can see the mid-north coast can definitely breathe a sigh of relief on CMC. This is, you can see this is EC, so you can see why, again, the blended image rainfall model outlook is pretty dominated by the EC one, because it's just this significant falls here. Now, we'll see if it happens or not. But again, you can see greatest falls really are Newcastle through to Sydney and the Illawarra, quite significant falls there if that does come off. And that is obviously worthwhile paying attention to. And you can see again, those falls don't penetrate that far inland either into, you know, the upper catchment. So really going to be a coastal event. And then this area here, the southern mid-north coast, I'm not 100% convinced. I don't know, not all the models have it. So it's a big asterisk. So don't get too stressed about that. EC's just one output at this stage. This is Access. So before I said that Access would probably have good falls for us in some respect from some part, but then pretty taper off quickly. And you can see it does very much clipping that coastal event. And that's that sort of Wednesday period that we noticed that I flagged here. So Tuesday, not much looking at Tuesday. And then sort of Wednesday night does click up as that low and the trough retrogrades back towards the west, and that compresses and causes that convergence zone right on the coast. You can see here. Again, it does actually sort of back up EC in some isolated heavier falls in that southern mid-north coast area. But again, nothing in the catchment areas that would cause any sort of river rain increases. But again, that would make some people nervous in that area. That looks more about the sort of Foster, sort of South Taree on the coast. So yeah, we'll put an asterisk next to that. But I think from terms of riverine flooding, I think that it's going to be okay at this stage, again, at this stage. But there's no real penetration of any of these models of heavy rain at all, pushing past the coastal strip. So, you know, you can breathe a sigh of relief, I think, from that perspective. And there's not going to be 300 mils in your catchment area at all. So don't worry about that fear hype. And this is GFS. Again, GFS is sort of flagging basically EC and Access. You can see really it's going to be a coastal event, and any of these models you can see the coast basically from Port Stephens to the Illawarra is going to be the ones that are going to cop most of the rainfall, and then we'll see exactly where the system pivots and tilts as they do, whether that pushes a little bit further inland or not, but still some pretty significant falls coming for coastal areas and on any of these model outlooks. So yeah, going to be a wet few days. These image charts though are from Monday to Friday, but because I wanted to make sure I give context. But really, most of the falls happen Tuesday, Wednesday, so it's going to be some pretty wild and wet weather on the coast, especially that sort of overnight Tuesday into early Wednesday to Wednesday lunchtime, depending on exactly how that that trough / low, whatever it does, pivots. But it's going to be wet, wild, and it's going to be pretty nasty winds, especially on that coastal strip. All right, so let's hop into your Patreon subscribers hyper local forecast powered by our Eclipse model, and we have included for you the rainfall totals from the 3 last runs now, so you can see just there's some consistency really about starting to build. So at 6 a.m. yesterday, Bankstown was 117, backed off a little bit to 101, but still pretty much that's pretty heavy falls, and that's only for this 1st and 2nd July, mind you. So it's just that 48-hour period. Campbelltown and Camden have both upgraded significantly in terms of the last 2 runs. So that's definitely maybe a little bit of an asterisk to say that's starting to push a little bit more inland. So maybe that EC scenario, I guess we'll see. The coastal strip, as again, Cronulla, Freshwater, Sylvania Waters, all doing incredibly well. 137, 143 mils. Hexham up there in the Hunter, 146 mils, has downgraded pretty much a lot since the last run, but still been pretty consistent in that centile range. Lower Portland has sort of swung quite wildly. And I think this is probably more indicative that it's the signal starting really starting to come through on all the models now that it's probably going to be more of a coastal event. But I think the orographic effect of the Blue Mountains and the Great Dividing Range near Portland is going to help them still get some decent falls. 72 mils, they'd be happy with that. I think Trace would be happy with that up there. Over 2 days, 72 mils, enough to give a good clean out and stuff, but not enough to cause any river rises or any sort of flash flooding issues. And again, Parramatta still doing quite well, even though it's this is the one that was quite interesting to me because Bankstown's only 101 and it's actually further east in Para. So that, and Para's consistently been around that figure. So that does indicate to me, if we go back to looking at the models here, there's no real models that do indicate bulging into the coast. Med-Eye probably goes close to you, but and again, EC, that northeasterly bulge a little bit, you can see, but still. So I'm just wondering what it's picking up. I mean, the axis has this little erect phallic sort of symbol here, and perhaps that's perhaps that's what's pretty going on there. It's like this little push in, but that's more the effect of the escarpment around there, the orographic effect. That's definitely picking up that Knights Hill, Macquarie Pass, all that sort of area around there, and that enhancement it'll get because it's going to be quite a low level moist feed as it races in across the surface and then hits 600-700 meter mountain range. It gets forced up. It's going to squeeze quite nicely up into quite strong shear above the surface, so it's going to squeeze the moisture out. But I just don't see on any of these models where it's really pushing into that sort of inner west area. So maybe there's a bit of a asterisk about some potential convective rain squeeze into this scenario as well. It's just a more isolated. And of course, when you raise that sort of scenario, you then tend to get definitely some more potential for flash flooding in sort of areas, isolated sort of local areas, but stronger chance for flash flooding because obviously anytime there's convective rainfall, you've got intense bursts of rainfall in hyper local areas. So that increases that potential. Alrighty, I think that's pretty it for now. I didn't really have a chance to sort of overly make the presentation dramatic, so it's not as usual swish that I like to do, but sorry that because it was just like I need to get people given briefed, and we'll probably definitely start our twice a day's update now, given that we're studying within that 5-day reliability, so the models are really starting to sort of attune, and we saw generally from the pattern that we've looked at the models before, they really are generally inconsistent of a pretty deep amplifying trough over the Tasman Sea, location yet to be locked in, but really like that northeast southwest alignment and tilt to start with is really conducive to some pretty decent rainfall, and then as it pivots and tilts, as the system gets sort of buffered around and then gets driven by those upper winds, anywhere that convergence will still get good rainfall and pretty damaging winds. So definitely something we pretty need to start tracking and having updates for. Thank you so much for everybody who's actually tuned in. Thank you for Bindai Bonky and Ryan S and Brad Thomas and Freaks. And why do you just copy and paste whatever chat GBTs you at the weather? Oh, hello, Freaks. Lovely to see you. And that's not what I do. But anyway, lovely to meet you. Thank you for joining. And, like other web pages, we won't blame you. But yeah, whatever. Lovely to see you. And Deborah, lovely to see you too. Good morning. So that is it. I mean, what a stupid comment for a start. Like, I've literally been here doing live commentary on the models as they're doing it, but I'm copying and pasting what ChatGPT says me. Yeah. Freaks. You should probably rename your nickname Freaks to. Yeah. All right. Well, that is it. No other questions. I'm going to jump off. Hopefully the stream's been pretty solid this morning. It looks like it's been pretty good from what I can see. Latency wise, been pretty low, which is great. Good to see. And been a pleasure to have your company. It's going to be an interesting few days next week. Again, looks like Tuesday evening and Wednesday is probably the peak of the weather for focus at this stage. Rainfall, still, I wouldn't lock in those totals because we know they're going to go up and down quite significantly. But those winds are definitely a concern. especially on those exposed coastal areas. We saw 50 to 60 knots and 65 knots at some stage areas, pretty significant. That's, going from damaging winds almost into destructive winds territory there. And that's pretty nasty. All right. Thank you so much, Bradley. Lovely to have you. Thanks for joining us. All right. Well, that will be the end of it. Thanks for your company. We'll see you tonight. I'll keep an eye on the Patreon for what our time will be, because the timing is problematic, as you know, with the models. And I don't want to go at 6 necessarily when we still only have half the models in and give half an update. So I'll update you that day. I'll double check the times. Otherwise, be kind to each other. Lovely to see you. Have a fantastic Saturday. Enjoy the crisp air. And we love you, freaks. Ciao.